The system's failed us. My sister's fought for her custody for years, and they didn't listen to us. And they let him take her, and now she's gone.
I just wish that the police, the courts, and that everybody would have done something to change this before it got to this point.
The heartbroken friends and family of a domestic violence victim are calling for change. 7-year-old Caden Mancuso's father killed her earlier this summer in Manayunk. Well, now there are calls for action from those who say this was preventable.
The steps creaked beneath his feet as he entered the silent house. He turned left and froze. Just a few feet away lay a sight that no parent, no grandparent, no human being should ever endure. The sneakers were still on, like she had tried to run. The small frame on the floor told a story of desperation, of escape attempted but never completed. For a moment, the world stood still. The kind of silence that doesn't feel empty but heavy, like it's holding secrets you aren't ready to face. What happened inside this home was not a random act. It was deliberate, it was calculated, and it exposed a truth that would force lawmakers, judges, and parents everywhere to ask, how could this have been allowed to happen? This wasn't just the story of a child and her father. It was the story of a system that had every warning sign, every chance to act, and still chose to look away. A system that handed over trust to the very person everyone said was dangerous. And when the outcome came, it wasn't just a tragedy, it was a betrayal. Of a little girl who trusted the adults meant to protect her, and of a family that had begged for help until it was too late. The questions this case raises are ones no parent ever wants to ask. If the courts don't listen, who will? If danger is obvious, why does the system still gamble with a child's life? And how many warnings are enough before a judge finally says, no more? What unfolded here shook a community, changed a family forever, and forced national leaders to rethink how custody cases are handled across America. But the change came at a cost no family should ever have to pay. Before we go deeper, I need to warn you. This story is deeply disturbing. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. Welcome to Disturbing True Crime Documentaries. If this is your first time here, please subscribe and let us know where you are watching from. And to our returning viewers, your support through comments, likes, and shares has helped grow this community and keep these important stories alive. Thank you. Caden Catherine Mancuso was born on October 15, 2010, in Trenton, New Jersey. From the start, she was described by those who knew her as radiant, energetic, and full of life. Her bright smile and easy laugh gave her a presence that was hard to ignore. Teachers, friends, and neighbors often said the same thing. Caden stood out, not only because of her natural talents, but because of her ability to draw people to her. By the time she entered Edgewood Elementary School in the Pennsbury School District, it was clear she was a gifted student. Caden consistently earned top grades, excelling in every subject. Her teachers described her as eager to learn, attentive in class, and quick to encourage her classmates. She wasn't just academically strong, she was a natural leader, often taking initiative in group projects and activities. Outside the classroom, Caden had many passions. She played for the Pennsbury Gems 10U softball team, competing with girls who were often older than she was. Her coaches spoke of her determination, her ability to remain positive, and the way she pushed herself to improve. In addition to softball, Caden was involved in gymnastics and local pageants, where her confidence and natural stage presence made her a standout. She had the kind of personality that blended competitiveness with compassion. On the field, she gave her all. Off the field, she was the first to cheer on her teammates or help them shake off a bad play. That mix of drive and kindness made her popular not only among her peers, but also with parents and coaches who recognized how special she was becoming. At home, Caden's world was defined by love and support. Her mother, Kathy Sherlock, was her anchor. Kathy worked hard to provide stability and give her daughter the kind of childhood every parent hopes for. Caden also formed a close bond with her stepfather, Brian Sherlock, who stepped naturally into the role of a protector, mentor, and friend. Together, they created a home where Caden could thrive. Caden's younger brothers, Kyler and Blake, adored her. Though they were younger, she took on the role of a big sister with pride, helping care for them, playing games, and teaching them lessons in the way only an older sibling can. She became someone they looked up to, even at her young age. Adding to this sense of family was the arrival of a puppy named Digger. For Caden, Digger was more than just a pet. He was her companion. She brought him into her world of games and imagination, often seen with him by her side in the yard or curled up together after a long day. Her extended family also played a role in her life. Her aunt, Allison Mancuso, remembered her as warm and affectionate, always ready to share stories or a laugh. Grandparents on both sides were involved as well, offering support and being present in the milestones of her young life. Caden's interests reflected the innocence of childhood, but also her growing identity. She loved unicorns and mermaids, collecting toys and drawing pictures that reflected her imagination. She was a fan of the Philadelphia Eagles and Philadelphia Phillies, proudly showing off her team spirit. And like many girls her age, she had a favorite song, Fight Song by Rachel Platten. She sang it often, and for her family, it became symbolic of her strength and determination. Caden's presence was unforgettable. Friends wanted to be near her, teammates wanted to learn from her, and family members cherished her every day. She wasn't just a daughter, a sister, or a student. She was a force of positivity, the kind of child who made every space brighter simply by being there. This background, this portrait of a little girl full of hope and promise, is what makes the next part of her story all the more devastating. She had everything ahead of her: a supportive family, strong friendships, and talents that could have carried her far. But her life would soon collide with forces that no child should ever have to face. Those forces began with her biological father. Jeffrey Mancuso, who grew up in the suburbs of New Jersey, appeared at first to have an ordinary childhood. Yet those closest to him would later recall troubling behaviors that seemed to surface early. In school, he struggled with discipline. Teachers noted violent outbursts, fights with classmates, and frequent confrontations with authority figures. At the time, many dismissed these incidents as youthful rebellion. But within his own family, there was a growing awareness that something more serious was taking shape. His sister Allison remembered the moment everything changed. As a teenager, Jeffrey was involved in a serious car accident. The crash left him with a head injury, and according to Allison, he was never the same afterward. She described how the emotional part of him seemed to disappear. The brother she once knew became distant, more volatile, and increasingly unpredictable. It was a transformation that the family would later connect directly to the events that unfolded years later. As he grew into adulthood, Jeffrey's instability became more visible. Alcohol became a constant presence in his life. It wasn't just social drinking. Family members described it as a crutch he leaned on heavily. Combined with his quick temper, alcohol often escalated situations into violence. He gained a reputation for aggression, and those close to him began to view him with fear rather than trust. Despite these issues, Jeffrey pursued a career. He graduated from Towson University with a business degree and eventually opened a staffing company. Outwardly, he could appear charismatic, even charming. It was that charm that first attracted Kathy Giglio, Caden's mother. The two met in 2009 along the Jersey Shore. At first, their relationship was casual, more an affair than a committed partnership. But when Kathy became pregnant with Caden, the two decided to move in together for the sake of their child. From the beginning, their arrangement was fragile. They shared a home, but slept in separate rooms. Kathy later explained that it wasn't love, it was an attempt to create the appearance of a family for their daughter. Behind closed doors, tensions grew. Kathy reported escalating aggression during her pregnancy. There were incidents where Jeffrey shoved her, and one particularly harrowing moment when he wrapped his hands around her neck, leaving her convinced she might not survive. These moments revealed a darker side that Kathy could no longer ignore. Still, when Caden was born on October 15, 2010, Jeffrey's behavior seemed to shift temporarily. He doted on his daughter. Photos from those early years show him smiling with Caden at the beach, carrying her proudly in his arms and dressing up with her for Halloween. Family members recall Kayden talking about how much she loved her father, describing him as strong and tall. But beneath those moments of tenderness, Jeffrey's volatility never truly went away. In 2012, the mask slipped completely. On New Year's Eve, during a fight in a South Philadelphia bar, Jeffrey assaulted another man so violently that he bit off part of his ear. Later, he recounted the act to a psychiatrist without any sense of remorse. This incident highlighted his lack of control and his capacity for calculated violence. He was arrested and entered into the criminal system, yet he continued to live without significant restrictions on his time with Kayden. As the years passed, his behavior spiraled further. He had confrontations at Kayden's school so severe that he was barred from the premises. Teachers and staff expressed concern about his threats and his lack of boundaries. His family described repeated episodes of rage, including attacks on relatives and erratic behavior that left even his own mother frightened. A psychiatric evaluation ordered by the court painted a troubling picture. The assessment documented major depressive disorder, suicidal thoughts, and personality traits consistent with narcissism and antisocial behavior. The report made it clear that Jeffrey posed a risk to those around him and lacked the capacity to take responsibility for his actions. For Kathy, the breaking point came when she realized that her safety and Kayden's future could not be secured in Jeffrey's presence. She separated from him and eventually found love again with Brian Sherlock, who became both a partner to Kathy and a father figure to Kayden. But Jeffrey could not accept losing control over his family. His obsession with power and his resentment of Kathy and Brian only deepened seeing how happy Kathy was without him. On the morning of Saturday, August 4th, 2018, 7-year-old Kayden was dropped off at her father's home in the Manayunk section of Philadelphia. The visit wasn't optional. It was the result of a custody order signed only weeks earlier, requiring her to spend the weekend in his care. From Saturday morning until Sunday evening, Jeffrey was granted full, unsupervised access to his daughter. That day, the two were seen outside the home. Neighbors noticed them walking to a grocery store. Later, workers at a local ice cream shop recalled Jeffrey chatting on his phone while Kayden sat quietly beside him. For a child known for her energy and laughter, her silence stood out. Witnesses described her as unusually subdued, almost as though the weight of the visit hung over her. Her family would later confirm that Kayden had grown fearful of these weekends. She had told those close to her that she dreaded his temper. That unease lingered as she stepped through the doors of his Manayunk house. Investigators would later piece together what unfolded inside. They discovered that Jeffrey had prepared for an act of violence. Among the items he had set aside were a 35-pound weight, a plastic bag, and an electrical cord. Along with these preparations, he had written a note suggesting that the events were not spontaneous, but carefully planned. At some point during the weekend, Kayden appears to have realized the danger she was in. The evidence told a heartbreaking story. She had moved quickly toward the front door. Her sneakers were already on, as though she was ready to bolt outside and escape. But she never made it out. Forensic findings later confirmed what happened when she tried to leave. She had tried to reach the door as fast as she could, but Jeffrey stopped her. Investigators later determined that he used the weight he had set aside aggressively on her. He then followed through with the rest of his plan, placing the bag over her head and fastening it with the cord. These steps made it impossible for her to escape, and at that moment ended her life. The act was not impulsive. It was methodical, deliberate, and final. Detectives would later describe it as premeditated, carried out by someone who had decided in advance that no other outcome would be allowed. By Sunday evening, the time set by the court for Kayden's return, there was no sign of her. Kathy and Brian waited anxiously, then called police when it became clear she was not coming home. Officers went to the house but told them they needed a warrant before entering. Believing they had no choice but to wait, the family returned home that night, gripped by dread. Inside the house, the crime had already taken place. A child who should have been safe was gone. A father who should have protected her had ended her life. And by Monday morning, August 6th, 2018, the truth could no longer be avoided. On Monday, August 6th, 2018 at 10:55 a.m., Caden's stepfather, Brian Sherlock, and his own father walked into the row home on Wild Street in Manayunk. The weekend had passed, and Caden had not been returned as ordered by the court. With rising dread, they decided to enter the home. The first discovery came within moments. In the living room, near the entryway, they found Caden. Investigators later confirmed she still had her sneakers on, as though she had been trying to leave. A bag had been fastened over her head with a cord, one of the objects her father had deliberately set aside. While Brian broke down in shock, his father searched upstairs. There, in a bedroom, he found Jeffrey Mancuso, who had taken his own life by hanging. Police immediately ruled the scene an apparent murder, suicide. Homicide detectives quickly secured the home. Evidence was collected with precision: a 35-pound weight, the bag, the cord, and a handwritten note Jeffrey had left behind. While authorities never released the full text, family members later revealed that it carried a bitter message, claiming others got what they deserved and that he had taken the last word. Forensic specialists worked methodically. After photographs and evidence were documented, Caden's body was carefully lifted from the living room and carried outside under a protective sheet. Neighbors and reporters who had gathered on the street saw the small, covered form being taken away, a moment that imprinted itself deeply on the community. Detectives later told the press that the scene left no doubt. The crime was not spontaneous. The objects had been prepared in advance, the sequence of events meticulously planned. And for those who had fought for years to keep Caden safe, it stood as one of the clearest examples of a tragedy that could have and should have been prevented. But the shock of what happened inside that house was only the beginning. When the system gave its response, the outrage that followed would shake the community just as deeply as the crime itself. The investigation into what happened inside the Wild Street home was brief, not because the answers were unclear, but because the person responsible was no longer alive to face justice. With no trial possible, the focus immediately shifted from criminal accountability to the larger question everyone was asking: how had this been allowed to happen at all? By Monday evening, Philadelphia police began releasing public updates. Detectives emphasized what the family had long feared, that this was not a sudden act of desperation, but one that had been planned in advance. Their words left the community stunned, but they also confirmed what Caden's relatives had warned for years. The system had ignored every red flag. The next day, the heartbreak spread to Caden's school. Edgewood Elementary, where she had been a bright presence in the classroom, opened its doors to grieving classmates, parents, and staff. Teachers described a silence that lingered in the halls, a sharp contrast to the energy Caden once brought with her every morning. One of her teachers, Jocelyn Setzman, told local reporters that Caden was a light in the room and that her absence could be felt by everyone who knew her. The school district quickly organized counseling services for students and staff, understanding that the loss went far beyond one family. It had shaken an entire community of children who had sat beside her in class, played with her on the softball field, and followed her lead in group activities. On August 11th, 2018, just 5 days after her life was taken, hundreds gathered at St. John the Evangelist Church in Morrisville for Caden's funeral. The service overflowed with mourners, classmates, teammates, neighbors, teachers, and strangers who had been moved by her story. She was later laid to rest at All Saints Cemetery in Newtown, surrounded by the community that had tried and failed to keep her safe.
Funeral arrangements are set for the 7-year-old girl killed in an apparent murder-suicide in Manayunk. Service for Caden Mancuso will be held Saturday at St. John the Evangelist Church in Yardley. Caden was a student at Edgewood Elementary School in Bucks County. Police say she was killed by her father at his home in Manayunk over the weekend amid a custody battle.
Funeral is scheduled this morning for a young girl who tragically died at the hands of her father earlier this week. Last night, family and friends, even strangers, attended a viewing for Caden Mancuso, the 7-year-old who was killed by her father amid a custody battle. It was Caden's stepfather who discovered her body Monday morning inside her father's home in Manayunk. 41-year-old Jeffrey Mancuso was also found dead from an apparent suicide. Caden's mother had a restraining order against Jeffrey Mancuso. The little girl's family says her father had a history of violence.
It's just very, very hard because there's never going to be another person like her in the world. And she has touched everybody's life, and nobody's ever going to be, anyone who knew her will not have a whole heart any longer.
The viewing continues this morning at St. John the Evangelist Church in Yardley just before Caden's funeral mass.
In the days following, grief turned into outrage. Petitions began circulating online demanding judicial reform. Thousands signed in support of stricter oversight and custody rulings, with Caden's case used as a tragic example of what happens when warnings go unheeded. Even Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf weighed in, formally requesting a review of Judge Jeffrey Trauger's ruling that had allowed Jeffrey Mancuso unsupervised access to his daughter despite repeated testimony about his history of violence. For Caden's mother, Kathy Sherlock, the pain was immeasurable. Yet she quickly resolved that her daughter's story could not end in silence. Just weeks after the tragedy, she began speaking publicly, determined to make sure that no other child would be handed over to danger by a system that refused to listen. Her advocacy would soon push this case from a private nightmare into a national conversation about how family courts handle risk. The weeks after Caden's death were filled not only with grief, but with determination. Her family, unwilling to let her story fade into another statistic, created a foundation in her name, Caden's Corner. Its mission was clear: to advocate for reforms that would place child safety above all else in custody decisions.
The heartbroken friends and family of a domestic violence victim are calling for change. 7-year-old Caden Mancuso's father killed her earlier this summer in Manayunk. Well, now there are calls for action from those who say this was preventable. Action News reporter Trish Hartman live for us now outside of the courthouse in Doylestown with the full story. Trish.
Well, Shari, it was a somber day of remembrance here on this little girl's birthday. Her loved ones called for change, hoping that something like this won't happen to anyone else.
Happy birthday to you.
A solemn round of happy birthday for Caden Mancuso, who would have been 8 today.
Justice needs to be served for her, and it's her birthday, so I figured why not celebrate her life today with the people that meant the most to her.
About 24 of Caden's supporters held signs outside the Bucks County Justice Center, not only remembering her bubbly personality, but also calling for the removal of Judge Jeffrey Trauger.
If he had just let her go with supervised visits, she would still be here today.
Police say Caden's father killed her before taking his own life in August. Caden's family says Judge Trauger granted Jeff Mancuso unsupervised visits despite a long history of violence and mental illness.
He shouldn't have custody of Caden. That was a court psychiatrist who said that.
Her family also hopes to bring a larger change, calling for court advocates for children in custody cases and emergency custody intervention. Demonstrators wore teal t-shirts, and many people put unicorns on their signs, trying to incorporate some of Caden's favorite things on what would have been her special day.
Unicorns were her thing, and she was about as rare and as magical as one. There'll never be another little girl like her.
I can't imagine the agony of Kathy today, Caden's mother, knowing that she should have been 8. And, I think about my daughter and blowing out candles, and I can't imagine not doing that with her.
Now, we did reach out to Judge Trauger for comments. So far, we have not heard back. Now, Caden's family says a written statement has been filed against Judge Trauger with the Judicial Conduct Board of Pennsylvania. And a representative from that board told me that any investigation into allegations of possible misconduct against any judge are kept confidential. Reporting live in Doylestown, Trish Hartman, Channel 6, Action News. Shari.
Okay, Trish, thank you.
As word of her case spread, outrage built momentum. Vigils and petitions soon gave way to national media coverage exposing the failures that had led to her death. What had once been a private struggle with the courts became a matter of public accountability. Even international voices joined in. Actress and humanitarian Angelina Jolie, active in domestic violence and child protection work, publicly referenced Caden's story as a powerful example of how systems too often fail children. Her words carried the case far beyond Pennsylvania, ensuring the tragedy could not be ignored. That pressure reached the highest levels of government. In 2022, President Joe Biden signed into law the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act. Within it was a key provision, Caden's Law, requiring states to prioritize child safety in custody rulings, especially when a parent has a documented history of abuse or violence.
A local family's fight for Caden's Law came to fruition yesterday when President Biden signed the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act.
Yesterday, Caden's mom was in Washington, D.C. You see her there, where she was able to personally thank the president for signing the reauthorization bill, which Caden's Law is now a part of.
Cardinal sin was for a man to raise his hand to a woman or a child. That's what this law has always been about, the abuse of power.
I'm in awe of the parents who, after the murder of their children, have fought to change the law to protect the next child. Parents like Anna Estevez, mother of Piki, Kathy Sherlock, mother of Caden. Even though that means reliving every day the horror and pain and loss, and remembering how they begged for help to protect their child and were belittled and ignored.
Caden Mancuso was 8 years old, bright, talented, and loved by her family and friends. She had dreams of playing sports, singing her favorite songs, and building a future full of possibility. But her life was cut short not by a stranger, but by her own father, enabled by a legal system that had been warned time and time again, yet failed to act. This was not simply one family's tragedy. It was a betrayal of trust by a system meant to protect the vulnerable. Teachers spoke up, relatives warned, even his own sister testified. But those red flags were not enough. The question that remains is why child safety was allowed to come second to legal formalities. Today, her name lives on through reforms that will protect countless other children. But her story is also a reminder of how quickly silence, hesitation, or misplaced trust can lead to irreversible loss. If this case moved you, please subscribe, share this video, and join the discussion in the comments. Your voice not only honors Caden's memory, it helps protect the next child.